Welcome to Microsoft SaaS Stories. I'm your host, Jason Young, a curious engineering manager here at Microsoft. And in this episode, we'll be exploring how CallCabinet moved from tapes to servers and now the cloud, dramatically reducing user costs and focusing on innovative features. Today, I'm here talking with CallCabinet. I have Ryan Kahan, CEO of CallCabinet, and I have Ravel Todd, CMO of CallCabinet. How's it going, you two?
Awesome. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on the show. I know you have a really
Fantastic.
cool story. Excellent. So let's dive in so that our listeners and viewers know exactly what we're talking about here. So why don't you just give me a little bit of background on what your company focuses on and what the products are?
Absolutely. So CallCabinet is a company that focuses predominantly in the call recording and analytics space. We are the people that record the telephone calls when somebody phones into a bank or an insurance company and you get the message, this call may be recorded. In a lot of cases, that's us. We take that recording, we store it for a number of different reasons, depending on customer needs, anything from compliance through customer service, through training, security, etc. And then use that data based on each customer's specific requirements.
I love that. Every time I hear that message now, I'm going to think about you. I'll be like, that's CallCabinet. Very cool.
As you should.
Yeah, exactly. So, kind of walk me through the history and like what made you first think about a SaaS model? Because I assume in the past, this was probably something that they installed on site. And today it must be centralized where you're able to record these things and ease setup and those types of things. So walk me through that.
Yeah, so I've been in this space for probably close to 30 years now. When I started as a junior in the industry, we used to record on those little DAT tapes. There used to be a big machine sitting in a server room, and every hour it used to start beeping wildly, and someone would run in with a new tape and put it in and carry on recording, and you just hope you never had to find a recording, because then you'd have to go work out which tape it is and try to rewind to the exact point in the conversation or in the hundreds of thousands of conversations. The industry changed quite dramatically, probably around 15 years ago, where the recording infrastructure was moved to computers or to servers. So instead of having these big tapes, you would record now to a hard drive. You'd put it like a card or some kind of piece of hardware in a computer or a server, and then record that information and save it on a drive, which made it a little bit easier, to manage. And then the next step was where that application to search for things became a web-based application. It didn't mean it was cloud. It didn't mean that anything other than it used a browser interface as opposed to having to go and install some piece of software on the machine. And then things started to change. So about 11 odd years ago, we were in the industry selling what we call today on-prem call recording solutions. So we would get called to a customer. They would say, we need recording. We would install a server, Windows operating system, SQL Server, all the things locally, and record the calls. And what started to happen is our customers, who at that stage were, like resellers or partners, were saying, well, we're getting into telephony. We are putting this new cloud-based PBX system out there, and we want to record call recording. And we did what every single one of our competitors did. You said, well, we already have a cloud-based thing. We'll just put it up in the data center or someone's data center, and now it's a web-based solution. And looking at it, we quickly realized that this wasn't going to be a long-term solution. How did you sell a phone system to someone for, let's call it $10 or $15 a month, and then expect them to pay $300-400 for a license to record that $15 a month user? So how did that work? How was it possible that it could work? And we took the decision, which was really a hard decision in the early days, because you're now selling something for $300-400 a seat, and now you need to find a $5-6 per month solution, which doesn't exactly pay the rent or keep the lights on at low volumes. So we had to look at, how do we do this? How do we scale? How do we migrate from a on-premise solution to a cloud-based solution? And more importantly, how do we get a product that works for this new type of industry that's coming? Whether the customer is a small, dentist office with 4 or 5 people in it, or a large enterprise with tens of thousands of people, you need the same solution that can work for all of them, all in the cloud, and all with the ability to scale and move with changes almost on the fly. So we sat back, scratched our head, and at the time, Azure was sort of starting to get going. We found a little program called BizSpark, which was in the early days of Azure, was a Microsoft sort of incubator program that gave us a little bit of free software and a lot of free advice and resources. And we started building out what today is our Call Cabinet application. It started out with, we were excited when we recorded 1 or 2 people in a day. And, now we're recording millions, and it's just, growing exponentially. So that's sort of where it started from. And the interesting thing about our application is it's always been completely Azure native from the first line of code that was developed. And it has changed from the technology that's been used. So initially with Azure was cloud services was sort of the go-to thing. Recent years, it's Kubernetes and other types of technologies. But really what we've done is leverage the systems available to us in Azure to be able to expand exponentially without having to do anything. So one of the things that always amazes our customers is they come and say, right, we've got 6,000 users on Microsoft Teams that we need to record. How quickly, what is the deployment? How many months do we need in order to get all of this running? And we've got months, hours. Just go click this button, authenticate, and you're up and running. And the reason for that is not because we're clever, it's because the system is built that way to scale in Azure. Azure automatically sees, hey, there's load that we weren't experiencing before. Let's scale up that load and be able to accept it. The other thing that was really important is the ability for us to, leverage Azure to save costs. So, when you look at, a lot of people think, well, when you're looking at cloud-based, infrastructure, it's more expensive. It sometimes is if you are not using it the way that it should be. Azure, because of the ability to scale up and down, means that you don't have to have, like in the old days, you had a big customer, you had a big server that had to cater for them for the 1 minute a day that they were at 90% capacity. But the rest of the day, they were at 30% capacity, and then most of the time they're idling at 3 or 4% capacity. So you would have to pay for a big piece of equipment for on average, or as a very small amount of usage. Azure has allowed us to manipulate that where we are paying for exactly what we need at the different points in time in the day. And as we scaled internationally and there's different customers in different regions, that's become even more important to us.
Mm-hmm. What really fascinates me about that story is how the costs were so high. But it makes sense. I mean, if you literally have somebody changing discs or tapes or whatever, starting from there, I see how it was such a difficult, such a massive insurmountable problem. But then over time, your problem shifted. It shifted from being just really expensive and really complicated to hitting that mass market. And I mean, you had to adapt. I mean, it was interesting. I thought what you were going to tell me when you were talking about going into Azure was, hey, for every server that we have currently, we're just going to pay for a server in Azure, kind of as an intermediate step. But it's so obvious that the cost would be through the roof. It would never be economically viable. So you were forced to say, okay, how do we really lower this per user? And then through a different architecture, where you were able to do that.
It's interesting because the majority of the industry, while you would think it would be logical, the majority of our industry is only now sort of moving into the cloud.
Yeah.
Because as of the last 6 to 12 months, customers have become a lot more savvy. So the security departments and security teams have become a lot more savvy. They understand what the solutions are in the market. They understand the difference between someone saying, hey, I'm cloud, just because you took your server and put it in the data center,
Right.
or spun up a VM in someone else's cloud and say, now cloud, they understand that there's much more to it, that there's redundancy around your data. What happens if certain regions go down? What happens if your database goes down? And all of those components that are built into the fabric of Azure that we've been using for all this time, people are slowly starting to be forced into developing solutions around it.
Okay. And then along the way, like, what do you think were the biggest challenges? And let's go over the business and the technical. So I guess let's start with the business side. So Ravel, I don't know if you want to cover the business challenges along the way.
I think it's discovering how are you going to distribute what you've just created, right, and get it out in market in a scale that's measurable. And I think the next step is, how do you establish your distribution based on a product that makes it frictionless to sell and to integrate. But you need to be able to make sure you're attracting the right partners in a very noisy place. And how do we stand out above our competition in the SaaS world? And so I think that has been since I've come on board, the most remarkable piece of this is the enthusiasm. When you have a product that meets that ease of deployment, ease of understanding, immediately appeals to the pain points that these partners are running up against with their customers, it's a very satisfying place to be, where we can come in and say, let us talk to you more about what this means. And it fits within the story that they're also telling to their customers that are either migrating to a cloud world or already exist there.
It's an interesting question. A lot of the challenges in the early days were that we were too cost effective. And that sounds bizarre, but we have an enterprise product that we were up against some of the biggest names in the industry, and we were selling a solution for literally 2% of their MSRP, and we couldn't work out initially why we couldn't sell. And it was always, what's the catch? You guys can't be a real company. There's got to be something else. There's got to be something else to this. It just doesn't make sense. And those were some of the the initial, I guess, business challenges that were out there. And don't forget, back in those early days, bandwidth was a huge problem. People were worried about, okay, I'm recording all these calls and it's gigabytes of data, which was, 10 years ago was a lot of traffic. I don't want that being uploaded to Microsoft Cloud to interrupt my daily usage. And there's actually core components of our software that deal with uploading of calls out of regular scheduled business hours in the in the event that they're recording
because they're probably VoIP calls now, right? So you're going to be competing with that VoIP bandwidth,
right? 100%. So well, it wasn't VoIP bandwidth in the beginning. It was just like we want to make sure our websites load. But these days, bandwidth is is no longer an issue. So a lot of those early concerns don't exist anymore, with regards to uploading. And quite frankly, most of the time, the recording is not happening in the customer's offices or in the customer's premises. So as you know, we're certified with Teams for compliance recording. When we're recording conversations on Microsoft Teams, that's happening between the Teams servers and our servers hosted in Azure. There's nothing that's flowing or going down to the customer site. So some of the challenges were really around technology and what was available at the time.
And then there have to be challenges. I mean, I assume that this has to be reliable. You don't want to lose those recordings. You don't want a significant downtime or other issues. So I don't know if there's any of those technical challenges that you wanted to talk through.
Well, look, most of the customers that are in the compliance space, that is critical. Losing a recording is just not an option. Some of them in the financial industry, more in other areas of the world than in the US. But if you look at, the UK, EU, Australia, those type of regions, there are significant fines in the millions of dollars for not recording calls, for not doing things the right way. So losing is just not an option. So that's where things like on the recording platform itself, redundancy and failover comes in. But more than that, on the actual storage of the calls, and making sure that they are stored in a way that is redundant, that is backed up, that is safe, that is secure. And Azure helps us all that with very little friction or very little pain points. We can very easily, store calls in, multiple locations globally and make sure that that's all redundant across regions, depending on what the customer's specific requirements are.
Mm-hmm. And then today, if you think about all of the things that you've learned over time, and now looking back, is there anything that you wish you had done differently?
No, not really. It's been, to be honest, look, we've as a company, we've grown very steadily over the last 10 years, minimum of, 50 to 100% growth year on year consistently. We could have, gone a different route and raised huge amounts of money and try to do things a little bit quicker. But I think easy and steady, the way that we did it, was ultimately has proved to be the right way. We built a really solid team of almost 100 people now across 6 or 7 different global regions, and I think that from our perspective, we're in the place that we want to be with the people we want to be there with.
Yeah. And it seems like at the right points, you made the right decisions, right? Like cloud wasn't completely new. It had matured to the point where you could build on that. So you were careful there. And then as the services evolved, you've just been evolving your product over time as well. So obviously listening to customer feedback, watching uptime and those kinds of things. So
listen,
cool.
it is a lot easier now than it was before. We all speak about cloud like it's just like a normal part of our lives. But I can tell you what, go back 5 years ago and try to convince a bank that you want them to store their calls in your cloud. It's not not so easy. But
I was in those conversations. Yep.
Yeah, yep. Those conversations have been becoming less and less and less. We still see them. Our product we do in 3 different versions. I would say 90% of our installations are our true cloud-based offering, but we still have hybrid customers that want data either stored in their own cloud, like maybe they got their own Azure tenants, or they want, they're happy to use our cloud for the searching and playback of calls, but they want the actual calls or video recordings or whatever it may be stored in their own local on-prem data center. And then you have those customers that just say, cloud is not approved for us, we need on-prem. And we have still an on-prem offering. It's really our cloud offering that's been made to work, as a complete on-prem solution, but those percentages are getting less and less and less over time, and the objections to cloud are getting less and less. Although the security requirements are getting more and more. So in these days, if you're a provider providing to banks, insurance companies, and you're not ISO certified or don't have the right certifications, you'll get to the point of saying, okay, you guys have got the order, but then you're not going to get through the security teams, right. And that's a big part of it, as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So as you switch from this running on servers locally, and then it was a SaaS application, how did you get the company to think in terms of SaaS? I mean, it's a totally different model. Like you have to support, I'm sure you had to support the systems 24/7 before, but it was just a little different, right? Like now you have to babysit exactly the things that you built and are running for all of those customers. So how did you go through that transition?
Well, I think it's a lot easier than it sounds. I think that when you're having, let's say you've got 100 customers, each with their own server, you've got all kinds of issues like how do I access the server? How do I know that the server is even down? If I do think it's down, how do I get hold of the customer at 3 a.m. to sort of say to them, hey, I think your server's down, but I'm not 100% sure. So the man-hour requirements are significant. When it comes to a true SaaS model, you're really supporting one infrastructure across multiple customers. You have full control over that infrastructure. You have all the alerting tools that come along with an Azure type deployment that lets you know straight away when there's a potential problem. So obviously we have a support team that's global and 24/7, so they're always monitoring things, but I got to give credit to Azure where it's due. It's very rarely down, if ever.
Mm-hmm.
I can think maybe over the last 10 years of one major outage, but everything else was really just insignificant because we'd leveraged the tools to do backup and failover in the event that some region did go down. It seamlessly failed over to the others.
Okay. And then how did you, I think we went over this a little bit, but maybe you want to dive into the details a little bit more. How did you do this in a scalable way? How do you, it's pretty easy to, make a connection and just record a call. But at the scale that you're talking about and trying to manage all of these things, through one infrastructure, how do you do that?
So it's all about leveraging the tools in Azure. So we monitor our applications. We look for certain key factors, memory usage, CPU load that are on the system. We know what the optimal ones are. And the minute that the systems see that load is above a percentage or heading into a percentage range that wouldn't be good, we automatically scale up services to cater for it. And we also set up rules. So we know that, for example, we have a big office in the UK. We know that they start at 8 a.m. UK time, and we know that there's going to be load on those every day starting at that time. So we'll automatically scale up instances in anticipation of that load happening, and then scale it down over the day as as load decreases, and then get it to a plateau so that we're able to manage the costs. And ultimately, us managing costs means that we're able to provide a better, more cost-effective service to the end customer. Right.
And then are you using Kubernetes, or is it just straight virtual machines or some other technology?
It's all it's 90% of what we have is now on Kubernetes. We actually went through a migration process to move from cloud services to Kubernetes. I think we finished it off probably around 6 months ago now.
Okay.
So yeah, we're using the latest technology across the board, and we have very few virtual machines, if any. They may be just workload orientated. Maybe we're doing an ingestion for a customer where we're migrating their data from a competitor into our system that we may need to spin up VMs for. But we require very few virtual machines. And I'm also very happy to say we don't own a server. So everything of ours runs within the cloud. So someone said to us the other day, well, how do you secure your data center? I'm like, we don't, because we don't have one.
Right. Exactly.
So we referred them to the Azure security and compliance page and said, read up. But yeah, it's
exactly. So we have some of the best. We have some of the best security in the world. You can tell them.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure that the door to the data center is welded shut. So I think you're pretty safe.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And then let's talk about security. And it's kind of the same question, but how do you build this in a secure way? I have to imagine security. You mentioned compliance, but security has to be super important as well.
Yeah, so security there's a lot that goes into it. It's one of the reasons we decided to go through the ISO 27001 certification, is making sure that we have the policies and procedures in place for vetting of new employees, making sure that policies are in place to limit access to data based on job function and job role. The infrastructure as a whole is extremely secure. We use obviously the basics like 2N authentication and a number of other Microsoft tools to both scan workstations and desktops and firewalls to ensure that the traffic coming in is coming from trusted sources. So we use all of that Microsoft front door as an example as and content management systems to scan data, make sure that it's all routing and flowing in an effective way. So, security is really key and paramount to almost everything that we do.
Yep. And then are you all looking, with this recent wave, we can't really ignore it in the news of AI innovation. Are you taking a look at this space? Do you have ideas? Anything you can share? Like, how are you approaching AI?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting. We've already have it integrated into our BI offering, or what we call our advanced analytics offering. So we do a little bit more with customers' data than just store, record and store it. We have a basic, analytics offering, which really we have a pre-built or canned reports and dashboards that customers can use to interrogate their own data. We also have an advanced offering, which includes a dedicated data analyst or data scientist that's assigned to each customer, and we go through the process of really getting them value out of the data that they had. What we found is that up until now, everyone says, oh, we do analytics. What they're saying is that we take your recorded data, we push it through some kind of engine, we spit out the converted text, and maybe if you will tell you that it was a positive or negative call based on certain words that were said. But we found that customers weren't really getting business value out of that. And to get real business value, you needed to start looking at more of the, more analysis of that data. You need to spend the actual time to understand the customer's business and to build out real intelligence in the system. Part of that is ChatGPT engines, which can quickly summarize a call, get information back, and bring that back either to the person who's on the call and say, here was a summary of a meeting that you just had, or alternatively to take that data and use it to and analyze trends to drive future business, business growth. And there's a lot that goes into it, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you phone into a business, my business, I was fixing your motor vehicle, and you phone in and say, I hate your company, you guys are terrible. And at the end of the call, you're saying, Ryan, thank you so much for sorting this out. I apologize, I was just in a bad space when I phoned you. Versus a call where I phone in and say, hey, how you doing? Everything's wonderful. And at the end of the call, I'm saying, you guys are terrible, you suck, and I put the phone down on you.
Right.
Same words, same emotion, different order. All right. And the one is an extremely positive call, the other one is an extremely negative call. So it's having the intelligence built into the systems to actually really analyze and get that kind of information at large scale to our customers that makes us successful in that space. And it's simple things. You may be an airline who has a rewards program and you make a change. What is you don't know exactly what people's sentiment is about that change, because very few people will phone in about it specifically, but how has your overall customer sentiment changed from the day before you made that announcement to the weeks following it? Are you seeing positivity in your calls or negativity? No. And then even going further, looking at calls and saying, okay, which agents are performing better than others? Which agents need training? Where is the issue? And as a last thought, simple things like compliance. 3 years ago, you would have a supervisor who would listen into a percentage of calls. So let's say that you needed to make sure your calls are compliant. You're in a single-party consent state, which means you have to tell the person the call's being recorded. You rely on the agent to do that. The agent is meant to, but you can't listen to every single call, but now you can.
Right.
So now we can literally listen to every single call and say, of these calls, here are your problem agents, and here are the calls that compliance may not have been met, so that you can actually proactively deal with that, kind of focus. So it's changing. The industry as a whole is not really changing, because recording the calls is still recording the calls. But what you do with that data and the business benefits to using that data have changed exponentially.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have so many thoughts going through my head because I'm just picturing, on the call, like the sentiment could be changing. I mean, AI could pop up on your screen too and be like, hey, this is not going well. Here's a suggestion for you. Here's something you could tell them, whatever that might be. Yeah, the analytics on the sentiment are amazing. And I also love the idea of you finish the call and it's like, hey, here's how you could have handled that better, like some coaching. I mean, Wow. I mean, you're sitting in a gold mine of data. Like there's no lack of signals and data to really glean insights out of. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then is this available in the Azure Marketplace?
It is.
Okay. And then what did that journey look like getting it into the marketplace?
Ravel?
Well, I mean, the integration on its own right wasn't very difficult. I think it's the drawing the attention that it's there and letting people know to then go out and go get it. But I think the integration was relatively swift on our side.
That's good to hear.
And yeah, and it was, and it makes it so available now is also just making sure that people, once they had purchase licenses, they then would be able to add on those licenses. So what were the hurdles in making sure that within that marketplace, those things could happen? So it's an ongoing kind of care and feeding as requirements of the customer that do purchase through marketplace continue to expand.
Okay. And then what benefits have you seen from that, from having the transactable app?
Well, I would say the accessibility for one, where people go on a regular basis to go get what they need. And so being able to direct our partners, not just customers, out there to get what they need very quickly and easily with just clicks, right? This is not massive amounts of integration work or provisioning work that has to happen. So
or in some cases, legal paperwork, right? So, some partners, they want to sign a managed service agreement or some way that they could purchase from us directly, but that would take months and months and months of legal work. But they already have some kind of, marketplace relationship where they can just purchase directly. So that was another big win from using the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah, buying from Microsoft. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Anything else that either of you wanted to mention that we didn't go over? Sounds like
the journey is really exciting. Yeah. I mean, Ryan does a beautiful job of telling a story that is not always a walk in the park for businesses that are getting going. And what he's seen and what he has learned is really valuable. So it's great to have it on tape and not just be office talk.
Right. But as the world has changed, I mean, you've done a fantastic job of just evolving with the realities of the market. So it's great to see this on Azure. Cool.
100%.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both for coming on here and just talking to us about that, about the journey and some of the challenges and also about your product. Thank you so much.
You got it.
You
Thank
bet.
you, Jason. Thanks for your time.